Good evening, and welcome to Footnotes Folly. I am Professor Reginald St. John Pemberton, and tonight we open the very first work of history ever written, Herodotus of Halicarnassos, his inquiries in plain modern English, from the first line, with nothing left out. We are using Macaulay's public domain translation. The plain rendering and the muttering are my own. This is part 1. Before the great war of Greek and Persian that this whole book is marching toward, Herodotus must first explain how the kingdom of Lydia and its fabulously rich king Croesus came to ruin, and he begins, as he so often does, with a foolish husband, a stolen glance, and a wise Athenian who tells a king to his face that no man should be called happy until he is dead. Let us begin.
The Persians who claim to know the history say that the Phoenicians were the first cause of the quarrel. They say that the Phoenicians came from the sea called the Erythraean Sea to the sea where we live, and after settling in the land where they still dwell, they immediately began making long voyages by sea. Carrying goods from Egypt and Assyria, they came to many other places, including Argos. At that time Argos was, in every respect, the leading state in the land now called Hellas. The Phoenicians came to this land of Argos and began selling the cargo from their ship. On the 5th or 6th day after their arrival, when nearly all their goods had been sold, a large company of women came down to the shore. Among them was the king's daughter, whose name, as the Hellenes also agree, was Io, daughter of Inachos. The women stood near the stern of the ship, buying the wares that pleased them most. Suddenly the Phoenicians passed the signal among themselves and rushed at them. Most of the women escaped by running away, but Io and several others were seized. The Phoenicians put them aboard their ship and at once sailed away to Egypt. This, according to the Persians, was how Io came to Egypt, though their story does not agree with the Hellenes, and this, they say, was the first beginning of wrongs. After this, they say, certain Hellenes, though they cannot name the people, sailed to the city of Tyre in Phoenicia and carried off the king's daughter Europa. These men were probably Cretans. In this way, they say, the Hellenes paid the Phoenicians back for the earlier injury. After that, however, the Hellenes were responsible for a second wrong. They sailed in a warship to Aea and Colchis, and to the river Phasis, and when they had finished the other business for which they had come, they carried off the king's daughter Medea. The king of Colchis sent a herald to the land of Hellas and demanded satisfaction for the abduction, and demanded that his daughter be returned. The Hellenes answered that, since the barbarians had given them no satisfaction for the abduction of Io the Argive, they would give the barbarians no satisfaction for Medea. In the next generation after this, they say, Alexander son of Priam heard of these things and desired to get himself a wife from Hellas by force, being fully confident that he would not be compelled to give any satisfaction for the wrong, since the Hellenes had given none for theirs. So he carried off Helen. The Hellenes resolved first to send messengers and demand that she be returned, along with satisfaction for the abduction. When they made this demand, the Trojans brought up the abduction of Medea, saying that the Hellenes were now demanding satisfaction from others, even though they had given none themselves, and had not surrendered the person when she was demanded. Up to this point, the Persians say, nothing had happened beyond the carrying off of women on both sides. But after this, they say the Hellenes were greatly to blame, because they were the first to begin war, making an expedition into Asia before the barbarians made any expedition into Europe. In their judgment, to carry off women by force is certainly wrong, but to set one's heart on avenging such abductions is foolish, and the wise course is to pay no attention when women have been carried away. For they say, it is clear that the women would never be carried away if they were not themselves willing to go. The Persians say that they, the people of Asia, treated the carrying off of their women as a matter of no account, but the Hellenes, on account of a woman from Lacedaemon, gathered a great army, came to Asia, and destroyed the dominion of Priam. From that time onward, they say, they have always considered the Hellenic race to be their enemy. The Persians claim Asia and the barbarian peoples living there as belonging to them, while they regard Europe and the Hellenic race as separate from them. This is the Persian account of what happened, and they conclude that their quarrel with the Hellenes began with the taking of Ilion. But as for Io, the Phoenicians do not tell the story in the same way as the Persians. They deny that they carried her off to Egypt by force. Instead, they say that while they were in Argos, she became intimate with the master of their ship, and when she realized that she was pregnant, she was ashamed to confess it to her parents. Therefore, fearing that she would be found out, she sailed away with the Phoenicians of her own free will. These are the separate stories, told by the Persians and by the Phoenicians. For my part, I am not going to say that these things happened in one way or another. Instead, after I have pointed out the man who, within my own knowledge, first began committing wrong against the Hellenes, I shall go forward with the rest of the story, giving an account of the cities of men, small as well as great. For those that were great in old times have mostly become small, while those that were great in my own time were once small. Since I know that human prosperity never remains steady, I shall mention both kinds alike. Croesus was a Lydian by birth, the son of Alyattes, and ruler of the peoples who live on this side of the river Halys. That river flows from the south between the Syrians and the Paphlagonians, and runs northward into the sea called the Euxine. This Croesus was the first of the barbarians known to us who subdued certain Hellenes and forced them to pay tribute, while he won others over and made them his friends. Those he subdued were the Ionians, the Aeolians, and the Dorians who live in Asia. Those he made his friends were the Lacedaemonians. Before the reign of Croesus, all the Hellenes were free. The expedition of the Cimmerians, which came against Ionia before the time of Croesus, was not a conquest of the cities, but only a plundering raid. The supreme power that had belonged to the Heraclid I passed to the family of Croesus, called the Mermnad, in the following way. Candaules, whom the Hellenes call Meocelos, was ruler of Sardes and a descendant of Alcaios, son of Heracles. Agron, son of Minos, son of Belos, son of Alcaios, was the first of the Heraclidae to become king of Sardes, and Candaules, son of Meocelos, was the last. Those who ruled this land before Agron were descendants of Litos, son of Atys, from whom the whole nation came to be called Lydian, though before that they had been called Meonian. From these earlier rulers the Heraclidae, descended from Heracles and the slave girl of Herodotus, received the government, having been entrusted with it because of an oracle. They reigned for 22 generations of men, 505 years, handing down power from father to son until the time of Candaules, son of Meocelos. Gyges, I think you do not believe me when I tell you about the beauty of my wife, because men trust their ears less readily than their eyes. So find a way to see her naked. Master, what foolish thing are you saying when you order me to look at my mistress naked? When a woman takes off her tunic, she takes off her modesty as well. Long ago men discovered wise sayings, and from them we ought to learn. One of them is that each man should look only at what is his own. I do believe that she is the fairest of all women, and I beg you not to ask me to do what is unlawful. Take courage, Gyges, and do not be afraid, either of me, as if I were saying this to test you, or of my wife, as if any harm would come to you from her. I will arrange everything from the beginning so that she will not even know she has been seen by you. I will place you in the room where we sleep, behind the open door. After I go in, my wife will also come to lie down. There is a chair near the entrance of the room, and on it she will lay her clothes as she takes them off one by one. You will be able to look at her at full leisure. Then, when she goes from the chair to the bed and her back is turned to you, it will be your task to make sure that she does not see you as you go out through the door. Gyges resisted with these words because he feared some evil might come to him from the matter. But when he could not escape, he consented. Candaules, when he thought it was time to rest, led Gyges to the chamber, and immediately afterward the woman also appeared. Gyges looked at her after she came in, and as she laid down her garments. When her back was turned toward him as she went to the bed, he slipped out from his hiding place and was leaving. But as he went out, the woman caught sight of him. Realizing what her husband had done, she did not cry out, though she was struck with shame, but acted as if she had noticed nothing, intending to take vengeance on Candaules. For among the Lydians, as among most other barbarians, it is shameful even for a man to be seen naked. There are now 2 roads open to you, Gyges, and I give you the choice of which one you prefer to take. Either you must kill Candaules and possess both me and the kingdom of Lydia, or you yourself must be killed here on the spot, so that in the future you may not, by obeying Candaules in everything, see what you ought not to see. Either the man who planned this must die, or you must die, because you looked at me naked and did what is not considered lawful. Since you force me, against my own will, to take my master's life, let me hear from you how we are to lay hands on him. The attack shall come from the very same place where he displayed me naked, and we will lay hands on him while he sleeps. At the time the queen kept silent, as I have said, and gave no outward sign. But as soon as day dawned, she prepared those servants whom she knew to be most attached to herself, and then sent to summon Gyges. He came when summoned, not supposing that she knew anything of what had been done, for even before this he had been accustomed to go whenever the queen summoned him. When Gyges arrived, the woman spoke to him and set the choice before him. For a time Gyges was astonished at her words, and afterward he began to beg her not to bind him by necessity to such a choice. But he could not persuade her. Seeing that necessity was truly set before him, either to kill his master or to be killed himself by others, he chose to live. After they had prepared the plot, night came on. Gyges was not allowed to go free, and there was no escape for him. He had either to be killed himself or to kill Candaules. So he followed the woman to the bedchamber. She gave him a dagger and hid him behind the very same door. Later, while Candaules was sleeping, Gyges came secretly up to him and killed him. Thus he obtained both Candaules' wife and his kingdom. Archelaus the Parian, who lived about that time, also mentioned Gyges in a trimeter iambic verse. Gyges obtained the kingdom and was confirmed in it through the oracle at Delphi. The Lydians were angry over what had happened to Candaules and had risen in arms, so the followers of Gyges and the rest of the Lydians made an agreement. If the oracle answered that Gyges should be king of the Lydians, then he should be king, but if not, he should give the power back to the sons of Heracles. The oracle did answer in his favor, and so Gyges became king. Yet the Pythian prophetess also said that vengeance for the Heraclid would come upon the descendants of Gyges in the 5th generation. The Lydians and their kings paid no attention to this oracle until it was actually fulfilled. In this way the Mermnad gained the government after driving out the Heraclidae. When Gyges became ruler, he sent many votive offerings to Delphi. Of all the silver offerings at Delphi, his are more numerous than any other man's, and besides the silver he offered a huge quantity of gold. One offering deserves special mention above the rest: 6 golden mixing bowls dedicated there as his gift. Together they weigh 30 talents, and they stand in the treasury of the Corinthians, though in truth this treasury does not belong to the Corinthian state, but is the treasury of Kypselos son of Aetion. This Gyges was the first barbarian known to us who dedicated votive offerings at Delphi, except only Midas son of Gordius, king of Phrygia. Midas dedicated as an offering the royal throne on which he used to sit in public judgment, and this throne, a thing worth seeing, stands in the same place as the bowls of Gyges. The gold and silver that Gyges dedicated is called Gygen by the people of Delphi, after the name of the man who offered it. As soon as Gyges became king, he also led an army against Mutos and Smyrna, and he took the lower town of Colophon. But he performed no other great deed during his reign, which lasted 38 years, so we will pass him by with no more mention than has already been made. I will speak now of Atys son of Gyges, who became king after Gyges. Atys took Priene and made an invasion against Miletos. While he was ruling over Sardis, the Cimmerians, driven from their homes by the nomad Scythians, came into Asia and took Sardis, except for the citadel. After Atys had been king for 49 years, his son Sadeas succeeded to the kingdom and reigned 12 years. After him came Alyattes. Alyattes made war against Cyaxares, the descendant of Deiox, and against the Medes. He drove the Cimmerians out of Asia, took Smyrna, which had been founded from Colophon, and made an invasion against Cleisomnae. From this last undertaking he did not return as he wished, but with great loss. During his reign, however, he performed other deeds very worthy of mention. He made war on the men of Miletos, having inherited this war from his father. Whenever the crops were ripe in their land, he would invade their territory and besiege Miletos in this way. He led his army into the sound of pipes, harps, and flutes of both deep and high tone. When he came into Milesian land, he did not pull down the houses in the fields, set them on fire, or tear off their doors, but left them standing as they were. The trees and crops on the land, however, he destroyed, and then he went away by the same road by which he had come. Since the men of Miletos controlled the sea, it was useless for his army to blockade them. He spared the houses, so that the Milesians would have places to live while they sowed and farmed the land, and so that, through their labor, he would have something to destroy when he made his next invasion. He continued this war against them for 11 years. During those years the Milesians suffered 2 great defeats, once when they fought a battle in the district of Limnion in their own land, and again on the plain of Maeander. For 6 of the 11 years, Sadeas son of Atys was still ruler of the Lydians, and he was the one who used to invade the land of Miletos, at the times just described, for Sadeas was the man who began the war. During the 5 years that followed those first 6, the war was carried on by Alyattes son of Sadeas, who inherited it from his father, as I have already said, and devoted himself to it earnestly. None of the Aeanians helped the men of Miletos bear the burden of this war, except the men of Chios. They came to the Milesians' aid in order to repay like with like, because the Milesians had earlier helped the Chians throughout their war with the people of Erythrae. Then, in the 12th year of the war, while the Lydian army was burning the standing grain, the following thing happened. As soon as the grain had been set on fire, a strong wind drove the flames onward and set fire to the temple of Athene surnamed Vasessos. Once the temple caught fire, it was burned down to the ground. At the time no account was taken of this. But afterward, when the army had returned to Sardis, Alyattes fell sick. Since his illness lasted a long time, he sent messengers to inquire of the oracle at Delphi, either because someone advised him to do so, or because he himself thought it best to ask the god about his sickness. When the messengers arrived at Delphi, the Pythian prophetess said that she would give them no answer until they had rebuilt the temple of Athene that they had burned at Asessos in the land of Miletos. This much I know from the report of the people of Delphi. The Milesians add that Periander son of Kypselos, who was a special guest, friend of Thrasybulos, the despot of Miletos at that time, heard of the oracle given to Alyattes and sent a messenger to tell Thrasybulos, so that he might know it beforehand and take whatever counsel the situation required. This is the story told by the Milesians. When this answer was reported to Alyattes, he immediately sent a herald to Miletos, wishing to make a truce with Thrasybulos and the Milesians for as long as he was building the temple. The herald was being sent as envoy to Miletos, and meanwhile Thrasybulos, already informed of the whole matter and knowing what Alyattes intended to do, devised this plan. He gathered together in the marketplace all the provisions found in the city, both his own and those belonging to private persons, and proclaimed to the Milesians that when he gave the signal, they should all begin drinking and making merry together. Thrasybulos did this, and made this proclamation, so that the herald from Sardis, seeing a vast quantity of provisions carelessly piled up and the people feasting, would report this to Alyattes. That is exactly what happened. When the herald returned to Sardis after seeing these things and delivering to Thrasybulos the message given to him by the king of Lydia, the peace that was made came about, as I am informed, solely because of this. Alyattes had thought there was a great famine in Miletos, and that the people had been worn down to the extreme of misery, but when the herald returned from Miletos, Alyattes heard the opposite of what he himself had supposed. After this, peace was made between them on condition that they should be guests, friends and allies to one another. Atys built 2 temples to Athena to Sessos in place of one, and he himself recovered from his sickness. This, then, is how matters stood concerning the war that Atys waged against the Milesians and Thrasybulos. As for Periander, the man who gave Thrasybulos information about the oracle, he was the son of Kypselos and despot of Corinth. In his life, the Corinthians say, and the Lesbians agree with them, a very great marvel happened. Arion of Methana was carried ashore at Taenaron on a dolphin's back. Arion was a harper second to none of those then living, and he was the first man known to us who composed a dithyramb, named it as such, and taught it to a chorus at Corinth. They say that this Arion, who spent most of his time with Periander, formed a desire to sail to Italy and Sicily. After acquiring large sums of money there, he wished to return to Corinth. He set out from Taurus, and because he trusted Corinthians more than other men, he hired a ship with a Corinthian crew. But when they were out on the open sea, the story says, the crew plotted to throw Arion overboard and take possession of his wealth. When he learned of this, he pleaded with them, offering them his wealth and asking them to spare his life. He could not persuade them. The men carrying him told him either to kill himself there, so that he might receive burial on land, or else to leap at once into the sea. Driven into this desperate position, Arion begged them, since this was their decision, to allow him to stand on the deck of the ship in full minstrel's dress and sing. He promised that after he had sung, he would put himself to death. They were pleased at the thought of hearing the best of all minstrels on earth, so they drew back from the stern toward the middle of the ship. Arion put on his full minstrel's dress, took his lyre, and standing on the deck performed the Orthian measure. When the measure ended, he threw himself into the sea just as he was in his full minstrel's dress. The sailors continued sailing away to Corinth, but a dolphin, they say, supported him on its back and brought him ashore at Taenaron. When he reached land, he went on to Corinth still wearing his minstrel's dress. After arriving there, he told everything that had happened. Periander doubted his story, kept Arion under guard, and would not let him go anywhere, while carefully watching for the men who had carried him. When they arrived, Periander summoned them and asked whether they had any report to make about Arion. They said that he was safe in Italy and that they had left him at Taurus doing well. Then Arion suddenly appeared before them in the same clothing he had worn when he leapt from the ship. Struck with amazement, they could no longer deny the truth when they were questioned. This is the tale told alike by the Corinthians and the Lesbians, and at Taenaron there is a votive offering of Arion, not very large, a bronze figure of a man on a dolphin's back. Atys the Lydian, after waging war against the Milesians in this way, later died, having reigned 57 years. When this king recovered from his sickness, he dedicated a votive offering at Delphi, being the second of his house to do so, a great silver mixing bowl with a stand of welded iron. The stand is worth seeing above all the offerings at Delphi, and it was the work of Glaucus the Chian, who was the first of all men to discover the art of welding iron. After Atys died, his son Croesus succeeded to the kingdom. Croesus was 35 years old. As I said, he fought against the Hellenes, and the first people he attacked were the Ephesians. When the Ephesians were besieged by him, they dedicated their city to Artemis and tied a rope from the temple to the city wall. The distance between the ancient city, which was then under siege, and the temple is 7 furlongs. These, then, were the first people against whom Croesus laid hands. Afterward he did the same to the other Ionian and Aeolian cities one by one, alleging various causes of complaint against them. Against those for whom he could find serious grounds, he brought serious charges. Against others, he charged merely trifling offenses. After Croesus had conquered the Hellenes in Asia and forced them to pay tribute, he next planned to build ships for himself and attack those who lived on the islands. When everything was ready for the shipbuilding, they say that Bias of Priene, or according to another account Patacos of Mytilene, came to Sardis. Croesus asked him whether anything new was happening in Hellas, and he put an end to the shipbuilding with this answer. O king, the men of the islands are hiring a force of 10,000 horsemen, and with these they intend to march to Sardis and fight against you. May the gods put it into the minds of the islanders to come with horses against the sons of the Lydians. O king, I see that you are very eager to catch the men of the islands on the mainland riding horses, and it is not unreasonable for you to wish this. But what else do you think the islanders have desired and prayed for ever since they heard that you were about to build ships against them, except to catch the Lydians on the sea, so that they might take vengeance on you for the Hellenes who live on the mainland, whom you hold enslaved? Croesus, they say, was greatly pleased with this conclusion, and because he judged that the man had spoken suitably, he followed his advice and stopped building ships. After that he formed a friendship with the Ionians who lived on the islands. As time went on, nearly all the peoples living on this side of the river Halys were subdued. Except for the Cilicians and the Lakians, Croesus subdued and kept under his rule all the nations: the Lydians, Phrygians, Magians, Mariandanoi, Chalybians, Paphlagonians, Thracians, both Thynian and Bithynian, Carians, Ionians, Dorians, Aeolians, and Pamphylians. When these peoples had been subdued, and while Croesus was still adding to his Lydian dominions, all the wise men of Hellas who happened to be alive at that time came to Sardis, which was then at the height of its wealth, each brought there by various occasions. One of them was Solon the Athenian. After Solon had made laws for the Athenians at their request, he left his native country for 10 years and sailed away, saying that he wished to visit various lands, so that he would not be forced to repeal any of the laws he had proposed. The Athenians themselves were not able to repeal them, because they had bound themselves by solemn oaths to obey for 10 years the laws that Solon should propose for them. So Solon left his native country for this reason and also for the sake of seeing various lands. He came to Amasis in Egypt, and also to Croesus at Sardis. When he arrived there, Croesus entertained him as a guest in the royal palace. Later, on the third or fourth day, at Croesus' command, the servants led Solon around to see the treasuries and showed him everything, how great and magnificent it all was. After Solon had looked at everything and examined it as he had occasion, Croesus asked him a question. He asked this because he supposed that he himself was the happiest of men. Athenian guest, much report of you has come to us, both about your wisdom and about your travels, how in your search for wisdom you have crossed many lands to see them. Therefore desire has come over me to ask whether you have seen any man whom you consider the happiest of all. Yes, O king, Telos the Athenian. In what respect do you judge Telos to be the happiest? Telos first lived while his native city was prosperous, and he had sons who were noble and good, and he saw children born from all of them and living to grow up. Secondly, he had what we count as wealth, and after his life he had a most glorious end. When the Athenians fought a battle at Eleusis against their neighbors, he brought up reinforcements, routed the enemy, and died there by a most noble death. The Athenians buried him publicly where he fell and honored him greatly. By telling the story of Telos and recounting how many points of happiness he had, Solon moved Croesus to ask further. The king asked whom Solon had seen fit to be placed next after this man, supposing that he himself would surely at least gain second place. Cleobus and Biton. These men were Argive by race, and they possessed enough wealth. In addition, they had bodily strength of the kind I shall describe. Both alike had won prizes in the games. Moreover, the story is told about them. There was a feast of Hera among the Argives, and it was absolutely necessary that their mother be carried in a wagon to the temple. But their oxen had not been brought from the field in time, and since time allowed no other course, the young men put themselves under the yoke and drew the wagon, with their mother riding on it. They drew it for 45 furlongs and came to the temple. After they had done this, and had been seen by the assembled crowd, their life came to the most excellent ending, and in this the deity declared that it is better for a person to die than to continue living. The Argive men stood around praising the strength of the young men, while the Argive women praised the mother who had received such sons as her lot. The mother, exceedingly delighted both by the deed itself and by what was said of it, stood before the image of the goddess and prayed that she would give to her sons Cleobus and Biton, who had honored her greatly, the gift that is best for a human being to receive. After this prayer, when they had sacrificed and feasted, the young men lay down to sleep inside the temple itself and never rose again, but were held fast in this final end. The Argives made statues in their likeness and dedicated them as offerings at Delphi, thinking that they had shown themselves to be most excellent. In this way Solon gave these men the second place in happiness. Croesus was moved to anger and spoke to him. Athenian guest, have you so completely cast aside our prosperous state as worth nothing that you prefer even private men to us? Croesus, you are asking about human fortune from one who knows well that the deity is altogether jealous and likely to disturb our lot. In a long course of time a person may see many things he would not wish to see, and suffer many things he would not wish to suffer. I set the limit of a man's life at 70 years. These 70 years give 25,200 days, not counting any intercalated month. If every other year is lengthened by 1 month, so that the seasons may come around at the proper time of year, the intercalated months will number 35 in addition to the 70 years, and the days of these months will be 1,050. Of all these days 26,250 in number, which make up the 70 years, not one day brings anything exactly like what another brings. Thus, O Croesus, man is altogether a creature of chance. As for you, I see that you are both great in wealth and king over many people. But the thing you asked me, I cannot yet call you, until I learn that you have brought your life to a fair ending. The very rich man is not at all to be counted happier than the man who has only enough to live from day to day, unless the fortune also goes with him of ending his life well while still possessing all good things. Many very wealthy men are not happy, while many who have only a moderate livelihood are fortunate. In truth, the very rich man who is not happy has only 2 advantages compared with the poor man who is fortunate, while the latter has many advantages compared with the rich man who is not happy. The rich man is better able to fulfill his desire, and also to endure a great calamity if one falls on him. But the other man has these advantages over him. He is not equally able to endure calamity or fulfill desire, but his good fortune keeps these away from him, and he is sound in limb, free from disease, untouched by suffering, father of fine children, and himself handsome in form. If in addition to this he ends his life well, then he is worthy to be called what you are seeking, a happy man. But before he comes to his end, it is better to hold back and not yet call him happy, but only fortunate. For a mere human being, it is impossible to possess all these things together, just as no single land is sufficient to supply everything for itself. One land has one thing and lacks another, and the land that has the greatest number of things is the best. So also with a human being. No single person is complete in himself, for he has one thing and lacks another. Whoever among men continues to the end in possession of the greatest number of these things, and then has a gracious ending to his life, he is the one whom I judge worthy, O king, to receive this name. But in every matter we must look to the end and see how it will turn out at last, for to many people God shows only a glimpse of happiness, and then plucks them up by the roots and overturns them. By speaking in this way, Solon refused to gratify Croesus. Croesus sent him away from his presence and held him in no esteem, thinking him utterly foolish because he passed over present good things, and told men to look to the end of every matter. After Solon had departed, a great retribution from God came upon Croesus, probably because he had judged himself to be the happiest of all men. First a dream came and stood beside him, showing him the truth of the evils that were about to happen concerning his son. Croesus had 2 sons. One was impaired, being deaf and dumb. The other far surpassed all his companions of the same age in everything, and his name was Atys. Concerning this Atys, the dream signified to Croesus that he would lose him by the blow of an iron spear point. When Croesus rose from sleep and considered the matter, he was struck with fear because of the dream. First he took a wife for his son. Then, whereas his son had formerly been accustomed to lead the armies of the Lydians, Croesus no longer sent him out anywhere on any such business. He also had the javelins, lances, and all such things as men use for fighting carried out of the men's apartments and piled up in the inner bedchambers, for fear that something hanging there might fall down upon his son. While Croesus was occupied with his son's marriage, a man came to Sardis who was under a misfortune, and whose hands were not clean. He was a Phrygian by birth and of the royal house. This man came to the house of Croesus, and according to the customs that prevail in that land, asked that he might receive cleansing. Croesus gave him cleansing, and the manner of cleansing among the Lydians is almost the same as that used by the Hellenes. When Croesus had performed the customary rites, he asked the man where he came from and who he was. Man, who are you, and from what region of Phrygia have you come to sit at my hearth? Whom did you kill, man or woman? O king, I am the son of Gordius, the son of Midas, and I am called Adrastos. I killed my own brother against my will, and therefore I am here, driven out by my father and deprived of all that I had. As it happens, you are the offshoot of men who are our friends, and you have come to friends. Among us you shall lack nothing as long as you remain in our land. You will find it best for your own profit to bear this misfortune as lightly as you can. So Adrastos made his home with Croesus. During this time, in the Mysian Olympos, a boar of monstrous size appeared. He came down from the mountain and ravaged the fields of the Mysians. The Mysians went out against it many times, but they could do it no harm. Instead, they themselves were harmed by it. At last messengers came from the Mysians to Croesus and made their request. O king, there has appeared in our land a boar of monstrous size, which lays waste our fields. We are eager to capture it, but we cannot. Therefore we ask you to send your son with us, together with a chosen band of young men and dogs, so that we may destroy it from our land. This was their request. Croesus, remembering the words of the dream, answered them. As for my son, make no further mention of him in this matter. I will not send him with you, since he is newly married and is now occupied with the affairs of his marriage. But I will send with you chosen men of the Lydians and all my hunting dogs, and I will command those who go to be as zealous as possible in helping you destroy the wild beast from your land. This was his reply, and the Mysians were being satisfied with the answer when the son of Croesus also came in, having heard about the request made by the Mysians. When Croesus said that he would not send his son with them, the young man spoke. My father, in times past the fairest and most noble part was assigned to us, to go out continually to wars and to the hunt, and so win good repute. But now you have barred me from both of these, although you have not seen in me any cowardly or faint-hearted spirit. With what face must I now appear when I go to and from the marketplace of the city? What sort of man will I be thought by the citizens to be? What sort of man will I be thought by my newly married wife to be? What kind of husband will she think she is married? Therefore either let me go to the hunt, or persuade me by reason that these things are better for me as they now stand. My son, I am not acting in this way because I have seen in you any spirit of cowardice or any other ungracious thing. But a vision in a dream came and stood by me in my sleep, and told me that you would be short-lived and would perish by an iron spear point. With this vision in mind, I urged this marriage for you, and now I refuse to send you on the matter being undertaken. I am taking care of you, hoping that, if it is at all possible for me, I may steal you away from your fate at least during my own lifetime. For as it happens, you are my only son. The other I do not count as one, since he is deficient in hearing. It is easy to forgive you, my father, for taking care of me after seeing such a vision. But there is something you do not understand, and in it the meaning of the dream has escaped you. It is right that I should explain it to you. You say that the dream declared I would end my life by means of an iron spear point. But what hands has a boar? What iron spear point does it have, that you are afraid of? If the dream had told you that I would end my life by a tusk, or by anything else resembling that, then it would doubtless be right for you to do as you are doing. But it said by a spear point. Since our fight will not be with men, let me go now. My son, you partly prevail over me by declaring your judgment about the dream. Therefore, since I have been persuaded by you, I change my resolution and allow you to go to the hunt. After saying this, Croesus went to summon Adrastos the Phrygian. When Adrastos came, Croesus addressed him. Adrastos, when you were struck by a grievous misfortune, with which I do not reproach you, I cleansed you, received you into my house, and supplied all your costs. Now therefore, since you first received kindness from me, you are bound to repay me with kindness. I ask you to be the protector of my son, who is going out to the hunt, in case evil robbers come upon you by the way to do you harm. Besides this, you too ought to go where you may become famous by your deeds, for this belongs to you as an inheritance from your fathers, and moreover you have strength for it. O king, if not for this, I would not be going to any such contest of valor. First, it is not fitting that one who suffers such a great misfortune as mine should seek the company of his fellows who are in prosperity. Secondly, I have no desire for it, and for many reasons I would have kept myself away. But now, since you urge me, and since I ought to gratify you, for I am bound to repay you with kindness, I am ready to do this. Expect then that your son, whom you command me to protect, will come home to you unharmed, so far as his protector can keep him safe. After Adrastos had answered Croesus with words like these, the party set out, provided with chosen young men and dogs. When they came to Mount Olympos, they tracked the animal. Having found it and taken their stand around it in a circle, they hurled their spears against it. Then the guest, the man who had been cleansed of manslaughter, whose name was Adrastos, hurled a spear at the boar, missed it, and struck the son of Croesus. Thus Atys, struck by the spear point, fulfilled the saying of the dream. Someone ran to report to Croesus what had happened, and when he came to Sardes he told him about the combat and the fate of his son. Croesus was greatly disturbed by the death of his son, and he was all the more moved to complaint because his son had been killed by the very man whom he himself had cleansed of manslaughter. Grievously troubled by the misfortune, he called upon Zeus the Cleanser, protesting to him what he had suffered from his guest. He also called upon the protector of suppliance and the guardian of friendship, naming still the same god. He called upon him as protector of suppliance because, when he received the guest into his house, he had unknowingly been fostering the killer of his son, and as guardian of friendship because, having sent the man as a protector, he had found him the worst of enemies. After this, the Lydians came bearing the corpse, and behind it followed the killer. Adrastos took his stand before the corpse and delivered himself up to Croesus, stretching out his hands and bidding the king kill him over the body. He spoke of his former misfortune and said that, in addition to it, he had now destroyed the man who had cleansed him of that guilt, and that life was no longer worth living for him. Guest, I have already received from you all the satisfaction that is due, since you condemn yourself to suffer death. You are not yourself the cause of this evil, except insofar as you were the instrument of it against your own will. The cause, I suppose, is one of the gods, who long ago also signified to me what was going to happen. So Croesus buried his son as was fitting. But Adrastos, son of Gordius, son of Midas, the man who had killed his own brother and also killed the man who had cleansed him, waited until silence came from all those around the tomb. Recognizing that he was more grievously burdened by misfortune than any man he knew, he killed himself upon the grave.
And there we will pause, with Croesus's house already under a shadow, the dream come true, the son he tried so hard to save killed by the very hand he trusted to guard him. The richest man in the world is about to make the richest man's mistake, and ask the gods a question. Next time, in part 2, he sets out to test every oracle in the world, buries Delphi in gold, and goes shopping for an ally against the rising power of Persia. Until then, mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.